You should resign. Former Minister Matt Conlon says you should stop blaming other people and say sorry. You and your government are facing a tidal wave of criticism. How on earth are you able to move forward from this moment and campaign for the NT election in just a month's time?
Well, tenacity is a virtue that needs to come from people who've got inner strength. I mean, we've got a situation where we've seen historical evidence of inmates in juvenile detention who've been demonised. You can't walk away from that. You take the responsibility and you step up and you try and make improvements into the system. Calling for a Royal Commission into ourselves, albeit jointly between the Northern Territory Government and the Federal Government, is a tough thing to do, but we want to make sure that not only are we providing safeness on our streets from a law and order point of view, but we also provide the right frame for kids to be protected and rehabilitated when they're in detention.
You've got to admit, though, it's a bad look when the front page of the paper is saying that the government needs to be sacked, that you've got this group of prominent Indigenous organisations saying the government needs to be dissolved. There's obviously something wrong going on.
Well, I'll leave that for other commentators to make. What I know is that we've worked very hard to seek to improve the justice system, improve it within jail, and also improve the social aspects and the dynamics of life, particularly in remote communities in the Northern Territory, from where many Indigenous Territorians reside and from where many Indigenous prisoners come from. So there's been a range of reforms put in place in that regard.
All right. Matt Conlon said this morning.
I just think the response so far has been inadequate. I think it has lacked compassion, and I think that we haven't owned this issue as a government. I feel that we need to take responsibility for what has happened, particularly on our watch. It feels that everyone else has been responsible for this treatment of these children in detention, except the Northern Territory Government. I've not heard once the Chief Minister offer an apology or admit responsibility for what's taken place from 2012 at least.
That's former Minister Matt Conlon. Why haven't you said sorry?
Well, I have. I've said it a number of times and I've put it out publicly in statements, and I'm happy to say it again on your program, that I'm sorry for anyone who may have been a victim in terms of past injustices at the hands of the correction system.
And are you sorry for any role that your government had in that?
Whether that's in our government or in past governments, and absolutely. And in terms of responsibility, absolutely I'm responsible and take that responsibility. We saw in the program on Monday night, it finished airing about 9:30. I was talking to the Prime Minister about 5 minutes after that and did a range of work on that night, and 1 a.m. in the morning put a call out saying that I'll be setting up a Royal Commission. 6 o'clock the next morning, we're on the phone with the Prime Minister and the Federal Attorney General, George Brandis, working out how we could establish a joint commission.
So you're happy with your government's response, you're happy with your response, you don't agree with what Matt Conlon was saying there?
Oh, look, I'm not going to pass judgment on Matt's comments, but I can say that since 8:30 on Monday night when I decided to take, or 9:30 on Monday night when I decided to take the responsibility of the corrections portfolio, lead a Royal Commission, and now in partnership with the Federal Government, we have been working a long way towards accepting that, apologising to past victims, but also standing up for those who may be victims of crime in the Northern Territory.
Adam Giles, the government is now considering moving inmates from Dondale to other locations, apparently Wickham Point Immigration Detention Centre. Now, the Human Rights Commission has described that as a completely inappropriate place for children. Is that location on the cards, and why consider moving inmates there?
Well, that's the wrong information. What I've said is I want to ensure that the new Dondale facility that we've got, it's not a brand new facility, it's a if you want to say, a used facility, but it's where we've got better conditions for youth detainees. I want to make sure that that is at the standard that is acceptable.
So you won't be moving them to Wickham Point?
What I was saying is we are looking to see whether or not we may need to move people if the standard of the amenity of that facility isn't up to scratch. Now, we have people inspecting that now, providing me advice after this interview to determine whether or not that's acceptable. But what we have done is made a few phone calls to identify if we did need to move the inmates to somewhere else, is there anything available? And that's the extent of those conversations. There's nothing more than that.
All right. You said yesterday that you didn't really mean it when you said in 2010 that bad criminals should be thrown in a big concrete hole and that you were only just venting exasperation about crime on the streets. How can you be respected as the new Corrections Minister when you said something like this, even if, as you were saying, you were just exaggerating?
I didn't say I was exaggerating. What I said is I was venting my frustrations as reflective of what the community in the electorate of Breitling was in Alice Springs. There are many people, even today, across the territory, whether you live in Karama, Maldon, Palmerston, Larapinta or Alice Springs, where the level of frustration around crime, and particularly youth crime, is at its highest. And
yes, but it's one thing to vent anger, isn't it? It's another thing to say that you're openly going to break UN human rights conventions to punish bad criminals. Isn't that pushing it too far?
Well, this is a comment I made when I was in opposition, and I was venting frustrations at the time of the system. Now, being in government, being the Chief Minister, you take a different approach in terms of your balance about how you seek to provide good governance, protect the communities, build economies, protect kids when they're in detention. And so there's a range of responses that you take and a range of responsibilities.
So you believe that comment that you made in 2010 was appropriate?
I believe it was venting frustrations that were being experienced at the time.
All right. Can I just ask you finally, questions over what the government knew, especially about this tear gassing incident in 2014, have continued. Will you keep trying to uncover more of this culture of cover-up that you described? And who do you believe withheld information? Do you think that was coming from correctional services?
Oh, there's no doubt that the former Corrections Commissioner provided information to Cabinet about the alleged riot of 6 offenders, which is now seen to be incorrect at the time. I do note that footage and the incident has been referred to police some time ago, and action has been progressed on those. The other footage from prior to us coming to government was new footage to me. I hadn't seen it in the past. I don't know who had seen it, but not being in government, we hadn't seen it. But not only did I find the image of the young inmate wearing a spit hood and being in a restraint did I find that disturbing, but I particularly found disturbing a kid getting struck, a kid getting thrown around, hands around the neck, and they are images that I hadn't seen before, and it's not abdicating responsibility. I wasn't in government, I simply hadn't seen them. And to me, they are the things that really got the hairs on the back of my neck up, and they're the things that made me want to call for the Royal Commission, because I want to see if anything else has gone on in that regard.
You and your government, though, did legalise that chair that we've all been talking about.
Absolutely. We did do that, and I've announced that we're putting a ban on that. We'll take some advice off the Royal Commission to identify more appropriate ways to be able to restrain a child when they are in periods of heightened tension, so that they don't harm themselves, they don't harm other inmates, and they don't harm prison officers. Right now there are 15 workers' compensation cases in the correction system, 11 correction officers who are permanently incapacitated as a result of harm caused by inmates, to the point where they'll no longer be able to go back to work in the front line. So I have to balance out the environment of protecting staff, protecting inmates from themselves and inmates from other inmates, but they're on hold, and we'll take advice from the Commission.
Okay, so if the Commission says they're okay, you'll return them?
We'll take advice from the Commission. We'll wait and see what comes out of that.
All right, Chief Minister Adam Giles, I appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Rowan.
Chief Minister Adam Giles.
And we'll leave that radio interview there where the Chief Minister was speaking to our ABC studios in Darwin. He said that he didn't believe that the Northern Territory's involvement in the Royal Commission presents any conflict of interest at all. He said he was helping and happy to help in leading the discussions on creating the terms of reference, which the Attorney General and Prime Minister announced just in the last hour. He seems pleased with the appointment of the Commissioner, Brian Ross Martin. He also said, when asked if he was sorry or felt responsible for the images that we saw on the reports earlier this week, he said he's already publicly apologised and taken responsibility for when his government has been governing. With regards to moving inmates out of Dondale and into detention centres, he did not say that that would necessarily be happening, but what he would be doing was making sure that the Dondale facilities are up to scratch, and if not, finding alternate facilities that are.